Finding Common Battlegrounds is an attempt by two brothers, one conservative, the other progressive, to have civil conversations about politics with a little help from their friends.
All right, welcome everyone to another episode of Finding Common Battlegrounds. We dedicate this podcast to having civil debate and trying to find what we have in common versus what we disagree on. Most people focus on what they disagree on, and it's usually like a shouting match and a bunch of like "you're stupid" comments. And when usually, in most cases, we actually have a lot that we agree on. So today we're doing rapid fire, and so we've got a few different topics that we're just going to go over and just go over a number of them and hammer through them. So but our sponsor, Lux Bidets. So bidets, civilized debate deserves some civilized hygiene, and that bidets are the only way to go if you really want to be clean. We're all big fans here.
Absolutely.
So I've got a number of questions I'll be peppering these two with. So Ryan will be, he represents our liberal side. Josh represents the conservative side. Brothers, but that's about all they have in common. So anyway, they offer great perspectives. Oh, this will be fun. There's a few things that I will, and I'm interested to get your take. So the first question is face recognition technology. So the article that kind of spun this off was there is a convenience store. And I was still trying to get down. Is this in the UK?
It's in the UK.
Yeah. So the UK, and so basically they have like AI face recognition technology that they're using, and so there have been some little protests, and this is like probably the first article of like many that are to come, right? Of like, is this ethical for a convenience store to use face recognition technology to recognize like a criminal, right? A shoplifter that maybe came in last week or something like that. And how ethical is this? China, they're going full bore on this, right? And they're like, if you know anything about China, they've got their whole like, the social score, right? They're like dinging, you have a score based on everything that you do right or wrong, and it gives you privileges and stuff like that. So they're like full in, but everywhere else is sort of like,
really?
Yeah, it's crazy.
I did not know they were doing that.
I don't know that they fully rolled it out, but they certainly were talking about it, and they did like a partial rollout. It's straight out of Black Mirror. If you guys ever watched Black Mirror, which is a great Netflix series.
I watched that episode where everybody has a score.
Terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying. Yeah.
So who's got the first take on this?
I want Josh's take, actually. Because I've got sort of mixed feelings, but I could totally be persuaded on this.
Here's the thing. I have mixed feelings about it too. And so that's why I'm interested to hear what you guys say.
Well, I'm going to be black and white then, just to be contrary. Now, I have no problem with the convenience store or any private entity, any private person, any private business securing their place of business however they want. If you want to put the face recognition software in your home or your business, what's wrong with that? It's your business. You should be allowed to protect it how you see fit, short of like murdering people that walk inside, right? But I do a full 180 when it comes to the government. Why does the government need that kind of technology? What's a good reason that the government would use that for? That's just not absolute fear mongering or totalitarianism. Like,
is that a question, or is that a rhetorical question?
I want to. Well, maybe you want to throw your takes out there, and then we'll discuss it.
Well, so you're basically saying this is similar to the Twitter argument of censorship, right? Of like, Twitter's a private company; they can censor who they want, and they can block who they want, but it's to their own downfall, right? If people are like, well, yeah, right, because basically a lot of people have left Twitter and what is it, Truth Social, and some of these other platforms that they've gone to, Parler.
Well, same thing with these stores. If a store has policies you don't like,
right?
Guess what? It's 2022. There are other stores to shop at. Go somewhere else. That's
and if you're exactly, and they're probably thinking like, if you're a shoplifter, that's what they want. They want you to go somewhere else.
Exactly. And it's more of this, because in that article that Ryan linked, the people contrary to this are saying, "Oh, we're being profiled and we're being victimized by this store." Like everybody just wants to be a victim now. Like, seriously, you're being profiled by this store? The store wants you there spending money, so they're only going to profile. I mean, if they are profiling you because you're like a Muslim or something, that could be an issue if that could be proved. But I don't think anybody's thinking that Muslims are stealing stuff, right?
Right. Can I complicate this a little bit then?
Absolutely.
Okay. So, and like I said, I don't have strong feelings either way on this, so I could easily be persuaded. A lot of the facial recognition software is trained on white models, on white individuals. So it's actually better at making distinctions with white individuals than it is with black individuals or people who, look differently, which means it's going to be easier for that to make mistakes with black individuals.
It's going to scrutinize white people more. That's what you're saying?
Yeah. So it's better at distinguishing and actually making accurate detections with white people than it is with black people. So
you're saying the computer just said, they all look the same to me.
Kind of.
I don't see race.
It's discriminatory, right? And again, I'm just trying to complicate this because that has been shown. Twitter's algorithms for like facial recognition and software, they have the same problem. Same with Facebook. So all of them have had this problem where you put up, a picture or something and it tries to like figure out what's in the picture or whatever. And their algorithms are not as good with non-white individuals. So you could run into an issue, and you mentioned like Muslim individuals, right? Well, that's complicated because Muslim individuals isn't a race, right? It's a religion. But if you go down that path, right? And who knows, the software could get better at this if they train it on more models.
I'm sure it will.
Yeah, but right now, it's very possible that it could be discriminating against people who are non-white just because it's not as good at discriminating.
It's just letting like black people steal whatever they want, and it's like, oh, white person, what are you doing?
Well, but it would be the opposite, right? It would be, we caught some black guy last week stealing something, and then a completely different black guy comes in the next week, but it doesn't know the difference between them. So it flags that guy and says,
oh, interesting.
Right. So it's going to do a better job. Like if Josh had, a doppelganger out there who looks a lot like him, it would be able to distinguish between Josh and his doppelganger.
Dwayne Johnson, The Rock.
Yeah. But it's basically saying they all look the same to them, kind of with the AI. That's interesting.
So it's going to effectively profile, right? It's going to err on the side of flagging more black individuals as being that, the guy they don't want in the store, then it would be white individuals.
And it makes sense. That's a valid argument. But if the store wants to run that risk, I think the store should be able to run that. I mean, it's probably a stupid risk to run, but the store should be allowed to run that risk if that's what they feel they need to do to protect their property. It's not like you can trust the government to do it. If you look at what's happening in California, people are just walking into CVS's, and as long as you're under $1,000, you can take whatever you want.
Hey, that's my one of my questions coming up. Josh, don't spoil anything.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
So
what's your take, Ryan?
Well, so the other way that I would potentially complicate this is, and I think I know where Josh should respond, but I want him to respond, right? So this is this is an open question for me. Let's say that I am going to that store, right? Maybe there are other stores that's perfectly fine. I don't know if either of you, right, when you're walking into a store, just pick any store. Let's say you're going into Target. Obviously, Target has cameras, okay? Mm-hmm. But it's not like there's a massive sign on the front of, the door, the sliding doors when you walk into Target. It's like, you are being recorded and we're going to keep that. And here's a form that you need to sign indicating that you're okay with us keeping your image on our, servers or whatever it is for whatever reason we want. You're not really like knowingly consenting to them recording your image. And I'm not trying to say, I'm not going down like the victim path. I'm saying they're not necessarily making it really clear to everybody what they're doing. How do you know? And if you can't consent to it, is that really ethical? So that's the question. And that's genuinely a question. I'm not saying it is or isn't. I think it's gray. I think it's a little complicated because we're being recorded all the time and we're not really aware of it. Right. And we're not really consenting.
This is really interesting. There's two things that like made me think of, and they're both Minority Report things. So first off, we're getting into Minority Report of like, if you watched it, right, that they're walking through the store and they're seeing his eyes and they're like, oh, Mr. And he's got somebody else's eyes. So it's like Mr. Tamamura or something like that. And hello, welcome back, Mr. Tamamura. How was that sweater or something like that? And which is kind of, it's creepy technology we're getting into. But the second part of it is I'm still unclear of like, how do they, what do they do? What's the actionable half of this? So say somebody walks in and they're like, oh, he's the guy that's shoplifted before. Yeah. Do they do anything? Because Target, they're recording, but I've never seen any do anything live action, right? It's always retro, like, oh, hey, we saw you shoplift. Let's go look at the cameras. Oh, yep, you took that thing. Okay, now you're not. So what do you do, right? So, okay, identified shoplifter comes in. What does the alarms go off? Does something happen? And then and can I be like, hey, you shoplifted before? And they'd be like, no, it's like it's the sort of like you're guilty till proven innocent kind of a thing versus, so that it's to proven guilty. Yeah. So that's a really interesting paradigm, right? That we get into of like, no, we know you're a bad person. Because you can even get into this, right? Of like this technology, right? They're going to sell it to different stores. What if I got recognized at one convenience store and then I come into another one and they're like, oh yeah, that guy's definitely a shoplifter, but you never stole at that store. It's very weird.
They do that
interesting stuff.
Like they're called advantaged players, the guys that can count cards at blackjack, right?
Yeah.
The casinos all all in cahoots. If you get caught counting cards at a casino, they kick you out, even though it's technically not illegal to count cards as long as you're not using devices and stuff to cheat. So they kick you out, and then you go on the blacklist.
As long as you're losing, it's fine.
Exactly. Then you go on the blacklist for all casinos, and they have that facial recognition software, and we're okay with it. With these criminals doing it in Vegas.
Are they criminals? They're not criminals. They're counting cards. They're smart.
Right.
No. I'm saying the people.
Oh, you mean the casinos are criminals?
Yeah.
Well,
okay.
Because it's such a rigged game. But by walking into the casino, you're consenting to play that game. So let me complicate it even further when we're talking about this technology. So the algorithms on YouTube and Facebook and stuff that track us all the time, and our phones are listening to us, they have these AI-like algorithms that they don't even understand how they work, but they are watching what we click on. They're listening to what we say to predict what we will buy, right? So they can throw ads at us. And now the software, the technology is getting so good, they're going to be able to start tracking our eyes and our mannerisms. So they're going to be able to know what we're going to do before we do it. That's where this technology is going. It's basically going to be able to read our minds without actually reading our minds. What if you put that in a store and go, that guy's about to shoplift?
Right.
Can you arrest him?
Showing all the cognitive cues or something.
Exactly.
He's going to do this.
His pulse is now elevated. His eyes are darting in a furtive movement. So it goes back to the Minority Report predicament. Even if you know somebody's a thief or is going to be a thief, are they innocent until proven guilty? In my mind, you have to keep it that simple. Until somebody's actually stolen something, sorry, they're innocent. But a store can still refuse service to anybody they want.
Exactly.
Well, so in that article, they did say what they do if somebody comes in and their software flags them, right? So the AI recognition software flags them, is they may confront them, but often what they'll do is they'll just go talk to them. So they'll send some security person. So you could do the same thing with the software that you were talking about, Josh, right? Like if somebody's making these furtive moments and they're like, oh, I think this person's going to do it. You don't necessarily have to wait for them to steal it. You could go out and curtail the behavior, not by arresting them, but just by sending a security person. By
standing awkwardly 10 feet away from them.
Right. So just send a security person to be like, hey, can I help
you? Do you need help? Do you need help again?
And that's,
do you need any more help?
So, and I'm not saying that's right again. Like, I think these are all really complicated, fun in the, like, let's think about them ethical questions.
Worth thinking about.
But I don't know the answer to this because I generally agree that it's probably okay for stores to do this, even though we're not really consenting.
And then what about the government?
Question, well, okay, so before we go to the government, because I agree that's more complicated, is if they are sharing this, right? I never consented to them sharing my image. So, okay, I get that. Like, if I walk in the door,
violation.
Right. I walk in the door. Okay, I've kind of consented to whatever security they're going to have in their store. But if they then share that with the store next door, I didn't consent to that.
Right.
So I think that that might cross a line.
That is interesting, right? If I'm shoplifting at Walgreens and then I walk over to Barnes and Noble, it's like, I do think actually you might be right that the privacy violation, if they are sharing it, a privacy violation may have occurred, right? That's really interesting, but it's very similar to credit scores and other.
Yeah, this is already happening on a pretty big scale.
Exactly. It's where I mean, granted, I do apply and consent to have my credit pulled for those. So, but we're getting into that area. So where it's already been shared, it's just a matter of getting access to it.
So probably the best thing to do is just do away with all that, and we should all just be assigned like an actual credit number for our good behavior by the government.
Right.
No, and Big Brother is here.
No, this is exactly what's going to happen. I've already walked through this logically. They'll have like your Barnes and Noble or something will have some sign that will say, by coming in, you are consenting for us to pull data from this X database, right? That's what's going to happen.
Possibly.
Because that's exactly, because they can't do it without consent, but they're going to say, by coming in, you're consenting.
And that's going to be in like size 3 font on the floor as you walk in, so no one will know.
Okay, but to be fair, even if they presented you with a 10-page contract when you walked in, you wouldn't read it. You would just sign it and go buy your Oreos.
I was about to say that. That's exactly like cookies and crap that you get on websites of like, hey, do you want these cookies? You're just like, whatever. And,
do you guys?
I don't accept cookies. I don't accept cookies.
Oh, I love cookies. I get as many as I can.
I'm going to eat a cookie right now, but I don't accept cookies.
So Firefox, I've switched to using Firefox because they have some pretty good tools. They have containers. So you can put different websites in these containers. So I only use Facebook in a Facebook container. So Facebook can't track me because I never open anything outside of a Facebook container. So
I like that. That's interesting.
They only see what I do on Facebook.
They'll get your cookies, but it's restricted to only that site. So it doesn't.
Mark Zuckerberg is listening to us right now.
Yeah, he's like, I gotta fix that.
You.
Well, he can try.
All of Ryan's porn is in another container.
That's right.
And it just stays there. And
then they can't track me, so they don't know what kind of porn I like. I mean, that's pretty straightforward.
Working on this stand-up bit of like, what is, it's like when you start seeing ads come up of things you've talked about, right? And you're like, what does this mean, right? You're like, I need new battery for the car, and the battery ad comes up. And then, but the other day I'm like, not for the last like 3 weeks, I've been getting therapy ads, and I'm like, what does this mean? I'm like, I need therapy. I'm trying to like, what did I say that triggered this?
The AI's got you figured out, man.
Yeah. They're like, you don't even know you're a psychopath and you don't even know it.
That's awesome.
I want to kill my dad and marry my mom.
Right. Yeah.
Oedipal complex therapy.
No. So usually those ads are really pretty accurately targeted to what I've talked about, but occasionally you'll just get one out of nowhere. Like I went on a 2-month thing where I just kept getting these online sports gambling ones. I have never gambled online for sports in my life, and it was like everywhere. It's like, what? Like what Tom said. What did I say? Where did this come from? Like I probably said, let's go play poker with my friends or something, and bam!
They're like, oh, we got him.
Yeah, AI's not quite there yet.
So Ryan, you're okay with it? You're okay with it?
I think it's complicated, and we haven't even gotten to government stuff, right? So we've really only talked about private corporations. I think it's complicated, and honestly, I think if they're going to do it and just hold it in-house and they're not going to share it, probably fine. It's not. It's like a step towards Big Brother further than what they already have, right? Because they're already recording this on cameras anyway. But if they share it with other stores, I think you're right, Tom. I think that's a privacy violation, right? That I didn't consent to that. I didn't consent to them using my information like that. And I get companies do this all the time when they track us because my information is now worth something. So there are companies out there that just deal in my information, all my clicks. And often I consent to that, right? By using Gmail, I basically consent to that, though Gmail is now in one of my containers. So all my Google stuff stays in a container. So Google can't track me when I'm off, doing something else on Amazon or whatever. So I don't know. I think it's a little complicated, but probably okay inside corporations. But what about the government, Josh?
Well, let me just flip that real quick, but I want to talk about the government. The inverse is, does the government get to come in and tell private corporations and convenience stores what they can or can't do to protect their merchandise?
Maybe, because the government can step in and say what they can and can't do as far as consumer rights. And the example that I would give here is, as a scholar, right? So as a researcher, I do human subjects research. And the government has now stepped in and said, these are the things you can and can't do when it comes to human subjects research. So I'm a private, citizen, and I'm not actually getting money from the government to do my research, but the government has stepped in and said, that's not ethical, right?
No,
basically because of Tuskegee. Well, Tuskegee, right, where they gave a whole bunch of people syphilis and then didn't treat them for it and tracked them for 40 years. Like, oh, what happens? And they were all black men, right? So
the government's done way worse stuff than that.
Oh, absolutely. But that's the one that really led to the development of human subjects review.
But I already gave an example of what's happening in San Francisco, where you can walk into a store and just take whatever you want. And
is that really happening? Come on. Is that an exaggeration?
You haven't seen any of the videos of that?
Yeah,
you and your nonpartisan
big
media
time happening.
I'm on BBC News. Clearly, BBC.
Unbelievable that you don't ever see any of this stuff. I've seen maybe 24 videos of guys just walking into a CVS, and sometimes they'll have like a ski mask on. Sometimes they'll have nothing. They'll just walk in with a garbage bag, fill it up with less than $1,000, and the security guard will just be standing there watching them, and they'll just walk right past him and out the store.
Yeah, it's really bad. I do have a thing that we're going to talk about that, but it's big problem.
CVS
Seattle
and
San Francisco.
Yeah, they've shut down like 20 stores in, I think it was Seattle. It's insane. So that's what happens when the government starts telling companies that they can't protect their merchandise. Anyway, to government. You were going to go into government. And
I don't think we need Josh's take. Of course, he thinks it's egregious, right? He's like. What's gonna happen here is you're gonna see subpoenas by government, right, to these private corporations to pull data. I think that's the biggest thing you're gonna see, because we see this all the time.
Ring doorbells.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
I think that was the article I saw.
Carriers.
Because they're doing it with Amazon and Google.
Probably Google Nest. Yeah,
they are,
because they've already done this multiple times with my Ring doorbell.
Yeah.
Where there was somebody down the street got robbed, and so they came by and said, hey, can we get your footage from this time period, because that's when a car would have driven past. And I was actually like, I appreciate that you asked and didn't just take it, right? And I gave it. So I was like, sure, I don't want theft in my neighborhood, so if we can catch them, that's great. But yeah, and they didn't subpoena, right? So they didn't just say, like, you have to give it to us.
Yeah, they
came and asked me, hey, we know you have a Ring doorbell, can you show us what you got? Sure.
The police came and asked?
They did one time, and then another time they emailed. And then eventually Ring got good enough that where I got a message through the Ring app that was saying, hey, there was an issue. Can the police see this? Yeah. Can you review it and then click whether you're willing to let the police see this footage?
Yeah.
So I'm okay with that.
You weren't running around naked during that time period?
That would be even better. I would totally send
that. Interesting. All right. So yeah, government. So that's where I think you're going to see a lot of it, unless they go full blown Orwellian, and then they do what China's doing. But I think we will have a civil war before that happens.
How far away are we already from that? Because if you think about airports, I guarantee you they're filming all sorts of stuff. And then certainly when people come in, right? So passport control type stuff. I think both of you have traveled internationally. I don't know how recently, but whenever you come in and out of the country, they're basically taking your photo. right? So, and other countries are doing this too. So it's not on the streets, right? That they're not out on the streets, though different cities will do that on the streets, right? But the federal government is certainly doing this in the places that they control, which would be passport control, migration, anybody coming into the country. They're absolutely tracking who you are.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Are you okay with that, Josh?
Yeah, because there's a reason for it. There's a reasonable standard, and they do have some protocols from that spiraling out of control. But the nature of government's to take as much power as it can. That's what government does. So yeah, when there's a reason for it, that's why I posed that question at the beginning. When there's a reason for it, I'm okay with the government. If there's a robbery, the government should be able to ask for footage. There's no problem there. But for the government to just have a wide sweeping complex of eyes recording everything all the time, what's the reason for it? It's a fear mongering thing. Oh, what if there's a robbery or something?
Well, I think that's exactly what the reason would be is, if you don't do anything wrong, then you have nothing to worry about. And
sure, that's where it always starts.
Thank you, Tom.
That's where it always starts.
For the listeners, you should have seen Tom's face because he was like, "What the hell are you saying?" Right? and I'm not saying that from my perspective. I'm saying that's the justification.
That's the argument.
If you're not doing anything wrong, you have nothing to fear. But if you are, then they're going to catch it. And I don't know if you guys saw this. I think it was like a BBC reporter. He went to China, once they had this system up in place. And they were making these promises that like within 30 minutes, we can find any person in our country. And so they took his picture, right, and put it into the system. And then he took off and he was just like using public transit and trying to get around. Sure enough, within like 30, 40 minutes, police had found him.
Wow. That's amazing.
So is that terrifying?
Scary?
Or is it like,
that's terrifying
thing, right? Like,
well
is somebody going to, we have Amber Alerts here in the US.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. If my kid got kidnapped, I'd sure be happy about that system. So there are pros and cons to that system, but the libertarian in me's got to err on the side of not having Big Brother have that much power. That's terrifying that they'd have that much power. Because once the government has that much power, what do you do? You're done.
I think it's the whole I go back to that quote, right? I think it's Franklin that says any society that's willing to trade freedom for security deserves neither and gets neither.
Yep. That's where that will lead to.
That's scary. I mean, we're already
we're on the way. I mean,
yes, exactly.
We're on the way.
We're incrementally moving toward it, but it's a crazy future.
Good question. Worth thinking about.
Cool. Well. All right, cool. All right, let's talk about these Dutch farmers. So, Josh, you're gonna have to fill this in, or both of you are gonna have to fill this in. So these Dutch farmers are protesting. I've seen these pictures of them with their big tractors, or like driving up. It's a lot like the Canada trucker thing.
Very
right?
similar.
Well, I think it's radically different for why they're doing it.
Why? Right. Yes. But what I read
is similar,
it's actually shockingly similar for why they're doing it. When you look at the subtext,
it was something about they were trying to, basically the government was putting some limits, regulations on how much they were like halving their livestock and agriculture yields, and then
climate change and greenhouse gas stuff. That's what it is. Yeah.
And then but they basically, I guess that was sort of like the catalyst, and now they're just like upset and protesting the government in general.
Well, the government seems like they're going to shut down a bunch of these farms. They're going to buy a bunch of the land, and anybody that's still there, they're going to make them reduce their herds and their output and their production by a lot. Okay, farmers are already living on tiny margins, 5% margins for the most part, right? They don't even make money unless they're being subsidized. And unless everything goes right, they don't make money at all. They lose money. It's really super hard to be a farmer. And the government just came in and said, everything I just said, we're going to shut down most of you.
Well, okay, but can we be fair to why the government is trying to do this?
Yeah, because they're totalitarian elitists.
No, okay.
That's not exactly where I was going.
But that's really what it comes down to. But finish your thought, and then I'll go there.
So
is this the farting cows kind of thing, the methane emissions?
Yeah,
it is methane, but it's more than that. Right?
It's more nitrogen.
So they crap and they pee, and when those combine, that releases even more into the atmosphere. So it's basically, and this is in the Netherlands, right? They're trying to reach their climate change agreements that they've made, and they're trying to cut down on their emissions. So they've made these promises of like, we're going to do this, and agriculture does contribute a substantial amount to this. And it's not just farting cows, right? But it's lots of things that go into that. And so they realize, the government, that one way to meet their climate change reductions, right? So to reduce their emissions is to crack down on agriculture. Well, I think to Josh's point and to the farmers' point, you have bureaucrats in government who are basically saying, oh, well, then we'll just do X, right? And they're not farmers. And they don't realize that by saying we'll just do X, this is destroying the livelihoods of generations of individuals.
But this is them making good on their promise for climate change. Yes. Saying, well, we said we were going to do this. Okay.
Well,
so we're essentially saying like, we got to get rid of these cows, meaning like we're going to butcher up these cows. And
no, not necessarily. I mean, it's farming practices. They're also saying like, if you change some of the practices, this will reduce this. So if you can keep manure and urine separate, if you can treat the manure separately, if you can do all these different things, that will help reduce it. But at the end of the day, we have to cut down on just the sheer number of cows, right? So it's complicated, it's problematic. I don't think the bureaucratic politicians are ill-intentioned. They're trying to do the right thing, which is reduce global climate, change. Like they want to reduce the emissions. How they're doing it is clearly problematic, right? And I think this is where we'll turn to Josh and he can give his side on that. But so I'm trying to just say, like, I don't think they're ill-intentioned politicians. They're probably naive and ignorant politicians, but I don't think they're ill-intentioned.
So I'll give you that, and I'm glad you acknowledge that they are not farmers, and you're a little more diplomatic than you should be. They're not ill-intentioned, but they are stupid and they're out of touch. Okay, let's break down the situation specifically to Holland. This is a tiny little country. Okay. Postage stamp sized country on the world scale. I think I heard you can drive through the whole country in 3 hours or something like that. Not a big place. They are the world's second largest exporter of food. That's incredible. They're only behind the US in exporting food. They're the biggest exporter of meat in all of Europe, the world's second largest exporter. What that means is this tiny little country, the farmers there are incredibly efficient, incredibly good at what they do. And that's also a huge part of their economy. They're in Holland, a very, very big part of their economy. And the one article I read about this, because none of us had a lot of time to research any of this, said that in the last 30 or 40 years, they have reduced nitrogen emissions by 70% already. So they're already doing that stuff Ryan was talking about. And we talked about this in the last episode. Why would the farmers want to be polluting? They're doing everything that they reasonably can to reduce pollution. Why wouldn't they? So here's what's going to happen. You shut down the world's second largest exporter of food months ahead of what we're all pretty sure is going to be a famine, because Ukraine and Russia, we got no fertilizer. Ukraine's not pushing all of their wheat out into the world. Several places are having droughts. We're still having supply chain issues. So everybody that's actually looked into this agrees we're about to have a famine, a worldwide famine. Who's that going to affect?
Poor people.
Right? Poor people. Thank you, Ryan. It's not going to affect these idiot elitist politicians because they make a lot of money. It's not going to affect Ryan. Sorry, Ryan, you're an elitist, right? You have money.
I wouldn't drive a Tesla. Yes, but that doesn't make me an elitist, right? Elitist implies that I like.
You've described yourself as the elite.
No, I've described myself as being intellectual and educated. That doesn't.
Which is what elites say.
That's
okay. Not elitist, just one of the elite. Elitist. Whatever. Okay, Ryan's not going to suffer from higher gas prices and higher food prices and food shortages, right? Neither are Tom and I too. I will more because I have a blue collar job, and I use gas for my job, but I'm not going to be destitute. The people that are going to suffer are the people that are already on the fringes, the people that are already poor and destitute. And so these psychotic elitists, they have no idea what they're doing, and they just ruin all the systems all the time in the name of global warming and saving the planet.
But Josh, you do care about global warming and saving the planet.
Let me finish this thought. Have you heard of Bjorn Lundberg and his think tank? He's over in Norway or Sweden or somewhere.
Possibly. I've read a number of articles by Lundberg.
So he has
on who he is, but
he has this think tank where they look at world problems and they try to figure out, we have a finite amount of resources and money. Where's the best bang for our buck? Should we throw it at world hunger? Should we throw it at climate change? Should we throw it at, renewable energy, whatever? And one of the main things he talks about is if you can keep people from being in poverty, if you can just get it so they're not worried day to day about how they're going to live, suddenly they start caring about the environment. But when you have no money and no food, you don't care about the environment. You'll burn down a forest so you can have a field to farm. You'll dump crap in the river. So
you're making a case for universal income.
That's probably coming down the road. We can talk about that later. So my overall point is the elitists are just so out of touch here. They're going to destroy this very efficient group of farmers in the name of saving the planet. The unintended like Ryan said, I don't think they're doing it because they're ill-intentioned. I hope, but they're idiots and they're out of touch because we're going into a famine, and this is just going to make things way worse. And it's the same idea with the Canadian truckers, right? You had the elitists at top. You had the Justin Trudeau saying, no, we're going to shut down all these businesses. And you have the blue collar workers going, that's a bad idea. We can't do that. And he rules by fiat that we're doing that. So now you have the blue collar guys going, then they start protesting. And then you have American truckers that pick that up. Now you have Dutch farmers, and you have farmers in Germany and Belgium and all these other places picking up the torch, right? Going, you elitists are ruining stuff. You're breaking stuff faster than we can fix it. Because as we saw with COVID, you guys weren't essential workers. It didn't matter when you guys went home. It matters when we go home. And you elitists are breaking it. You don't know what you're doing. That is the problem. So these protests are going to keep spiraling out, the truckers and the farmers, until we get rid of these morons that are running these places that have no idea what they're doing. They just break stuff.
Yeah. So one, can we just stop using the term elitist?
Nope, because that's what they are.
No, they're not, right? It's just a
they
pejorative.
are.
No, it's just a pejorative, Josh.
Go read history.
Call me an elitist, right? You call me elitist, and I don't am I an elitist because I've got an education? Is that the basis for calling somebody an elitist, or because I drive a Tesla?
Is it a pejorative?
It is. That's exactly how he's using it. It's just, I don't like these people.
You have in the past described yourself as one of the elite. You have said that on the podcast.
You
have said that.
It's an interpretation if you think it's a pejorative or not. I don't know because if you meet the classification, I think.
Well, what is the classification? Because he just keeps calling people he doesn't like elitists.
No. Here's how I would classify it. This is what I mean. People that think they know what's best for other people. That's, in my mind, that's an elitist.
Josh, do you know what's best for your kids?
Really?
I'm a bastard because I just caught you, didn't I?
You didn't catch me. Kid, I'm not
Absolutely.
talking about kids.
Okay,
No.
So we're not talking about kids.
No, I'm not talking about kids. So give me another example of how you can catch me with my definition there where it doesn't come to kids.
Absolutely. Do you think you know what's best for your parents? Particularly once they're over 75.
No.
Yeah.
All right, Josh, you got to put some parameters because Ryan's going to go. It's got to be something like, upper middle class. Is it Jeff Bezos education?
No, just go read a history book. Okay.
Define the term because you keep throwing it around.
When the communists took over Russia, the elitists took over and they said, we know what's best. We're going to institute communism, and it's going to be better for. Yes, exactly. It's going to be better for everybody. And then when it wasn't better for everybody, what did they do? They said, "Oh, it's the kulaks' fault." So you had this subclass of farmers who provided food for 95% of Russia.
Sure.
And when the elitists in charge, when it was proven that they didn't know what they did, they said, "Oh, go get the kulaks. It's their fault. They're conspiring against us."
But you still haven't defined what elitist. Do you just mean people with like advanced education? Is that all you're getting at?
No,
because Lenin was one of the elitists, I guess, right? But
yes.
Lenin, what makes him elite?
But
because he thought he knew. Okay, this is the great evil of the world. I guess I should take
Josh
this back.
is right in that, because I don't think a lot of those people that rose up in Russia were highly educated.
Yeah,
they were
I don't care about that.
They were revolutionaries. So, but I get what you're saying, Josh, right? It's almost like it's that sort of virtue signaling where like I know more than you do, and therefore I'm gonna dictate what you should be doing.
So experts are elitists.
This is where you're going to take issue with this even more so. If you think
pilots
no, that's not
medical doctors.
See how you're avoiding it? You're avoiding the crux of the issue.
Josh,
if you think you know
lawn care?
Okay, shut up and listen. If you think you know how somebody should be living their life, I'm not talking about in a field like a pilot. Of course, we have professionals. Okay, I have no problem with professionals. I have no problem with people that are educated. Education's great. Okay, I've never said that. You're drawing this crazy straw man argument.
I'm trying to get at what you mean by
shut up and listen.
You keep throwing it.
If you think you know how somebody else should be living their life, and you want to go gain power so that you can put in laws into place so that person has to live how you think they should live, you're an elitist.
Then that's just politicians.
For
you put a caveat on it. Because if you only did the first part and you said, if you know how people should be living their lives, then I would say medical doctors who give people medical advice would definitely fall into that category.
I'm not talking about that. You know I'm not.
We're going to move on to the next question. And Josh's homework is to define elitist so that he can use it against Ryan.
Because I don't consider myself an elitist by any stretch. I'm educated, but I'm not trying to get power so I can tell Josh how to live his life. That would only be politicians. But that would be true for all politicians. So all politicians would be elitist, and they would be the only ones.
Wow. See how you avoid the actual question because you don't want to address it?
Third question.
Everybody listening knows what I'm talking about, and you just avoided it.
I just avoided it all.
You did.
Is Putin a mad genius? That's my third question.
Ooh.
Oh, that's interesting.
So I've heard some people kind of talking about this, that he actually is the mastermind here. He's
losing the war on purpose. I actually had that thought this week.
Well, so basically he has Europe is got a lot of problems right now, right? And with energy and Putin I guess they're playing around with that pipeline a lot, and they've got it down they've reduced it down to 20%. Yep. And that's and it's basically I was reading a number of articles that now the EU wants to pass regulations to reduce the amount of energy that everyone can use, but Spain and Portugal are like, no, we don't want you to control that. And Germany's like, yeah, and it's really actually like creating a lot of cracks within the EU, and seeing a little bit of what is it? Fracturing of the union, of the European Union, and people are like, well, this is like Putin's, basically like, and there's that, and then the idea that he's sort of been preparing he bought a lot of gold, and he bought a lot of the SWIFT. I don't know if you've heard much about that. That's the
SWIFT is a banking system.
Yeah, it's like the banking system that the US uses, or the world uses, to transfer money around. And they were like, well, we're going to kick you off SWIFT. And like, oh yeah, we've been off that for months. Right. And they were like, no big deal. In that. So basically he was kind of prepared for this to an extent.
Right.
And he's using a number of things to destabilize the region. And that basically, yeah, I think he's taken his punches for sure, but he might actually inflict more damage than we're going to inflict on him. Is sort of some kind of theories have been saying. Well, what's your guys' take? What do you guys think?
The first thing is a perfect seg from what we were just talking about, because what caused the energy crisis in Europe?
Elitists.
we're going to get
whoever they are. I don't know who they are, but those guys.
All of the leftist politicians that said,
so it's only leftist politicians
for the most part, yes.
Oh, okay.
Because in the name of climate change, we're going to get rid of all of our energy independence because green. We want to be green, and then they gave Putin all the power. But anyway,
that makes no sense. That logic was completely incoherent because they didn't switch to non-renewable energy to renewable energy sources.
Why is Europe on its knees right now?
Because they're on fossil fuels that come from Russia.
Yeah.
So if it was all leftist elitists trying to switch to green energy, they wouldn't have gone to getting gas and oil from Russia. That logic is completely incoherent.
Where would they have gone?
Incoherent.
No, because
they would have gone to solar or nuclear or wind or anything
which they're trying to do, but it's not good. But it's not good enough to sustain entire countries or the entire continent of Europe at this point.
But they could get there.
In the name of going green, they outsourced all of their energy dependence to Russia. That's exactly what they did. That's exactly what they did.
Germany cut down their power plants after the tsunami in Japan. That's when they cut down their nuclear plants.
To Tom's question, I had that same thought this week when I was thinking about the war in Ukraine, because you would think that there's no way they were really that incompetent, right?
Russia or
the Russians?
Putin.
Because they thought they'd take it out in 2 months. And now we're like 5 months in or whatever. And I got thinking about that. Yeah, this is really going to kick Europe's butt. We have the incoming famine that I think is really going to happen. We have crazy high energy prices. You have people in like Germany that are stocking up on firewood right now because they're worried about heating their homes this winter. This is interesting. Tom's points are actually different than what I was thinking about, but was Putin really this smart? I don't think he is a super genius, but maybe because I think he's going to really wreak havoc on all of his geopolitical enemies. I really do.
I think so too, but I think you guys are giving Putin a little bit too much credit. So one, Josh, you are supposedly a student of history here. How did Russia fare in World War II? At least early on, right? Were they the rock solid army that just kicked everybody's butts? Or did they get their asses handed to them quite a bit and then just kept throwing bodies at the Germans? And they threw millions and millions of bodies.
You need to be more specific on which part of the war you're talking about. Right off the bat, yeah, they did just fine because they were allied with the Germans and the Polish were like on forces. Then when the Nazis turned on them, the Russians get their butt kicked because they always get their butt kicked. Everybody, they can't win an offensive war. They never do. The only way they can win a war is they pull back to Moscow, burn everything in front of them, and then Mother Russia kill them. That's what they did with Napoleon. That's what they did with Charles XII. That's what they did with the Nazis. That's all they can ever do. Okay. They're pretty pathetic.
So when you say maybe he was plotting of like, oh, we'll just go into Ukraine, but we're botching everything. Isn't this just par for the course?
That's what I've thought for 5 months, and that's probably still the case. I just had a thought this week, but
right. So if I was going through Putin's logic, it was Europe is dependent upon us for energy.
Mm-hmm.
So if we attack and we have nuclear weapons, they really can't come to the defense of Ukraine, right? All they can do is maybe funnel some weapons, but we're going to overwhelm Ukraine in a couple of days because we have overwhelming numbers and we'll win. And we did it with Crimea. We just basically took it, right?
Yeah.
We're going to do the same thing. I don't think he was thinking, if I make this war last for years, this is going to destroy the European Union, right? You're giving him way too much credit. I'm
not saying I think that's what he thought, but could it be that he's shifting now that he's seeing the
he could be shifting now.
Toll? Maybe he's thinking, maybe I drag this out as long as I can. Because I heard somebody talking the other day that Germany's kind of on the brink right now.
Brink of what?
Of collapsing and falling. And if they collapse, the European Union collapses.
Yes.
If that happens, Russia just became the major power on the continent, no problem.
Yeah, but right now, Germany is in the process of building up their ability to import gas, liquefied natural gas through shipping. They didn't have that because they had basically built that Nord Stream pipeline and they were building Nord Stream 2. And they basically neglected the idea of having ports where they can bring in those massive tankers that have liquefied gas. They didn't have a way to offload it. So they found a way I think it's in Poland. There's actually a port where they could do that. And now they're building up capacity so we can export it. So they can get it from other countries and they don't have to be reliant upon Russia. So
that's not going to happen overnight. They're going to have a really rough winter.
Yes, they very well may, but they're building that capacity as fast as possible
because of the elitists.
My take is I don't actually think he's a mad genius, but I think it always goes back to never underestimate someone who's sort of isolated and alone. It's kind of like the North Korea thing, right? I think we've done a good job with North Korea in that we've left it alone. But like, I think if you push North Korea, they could like do some nasty stuff, right? And like, but like, you just stay away from the crazies. And because I think what I read, I've been reading a lot about deglobalization and the end of globalization, and which is very interesting, and it's totally happening. But Peter Zehan is awesome, guys. Ever looked up his stuff? It's great. But he's just basically talking about like a post-globalization era and what it's going to look like, and very, very compelling, very interesting, and they all make sense. Everything he says makes sense. But I think we're starting to. I think Putin is escalating it or bringing it about faster and faster. Just sort of everyone kind of breaking out on their own, and then yeah, I think my take on Russia is like Russia's like this like beaten up, tough, scrappy, poor kid, right? European bloc that like he could take a number of punches and they'll just kind of like. But he'll punch back, and you've got the nice Italian guy in the suit, and he's gonna walk away looking like he took a worse. You might have inflicted more damage on Russia, but they could take a lot more just because they're so freaking backwards.
Because he's already drunk. He's not even feeling it. Yeah.
Right. No, kind of thing. Right. Yeah. And so I think Putin's like, and he'll be laughing in the end, even if he's got, several teeth missing. Right.
But he won't. It's the Russian people that are suffering. The Russian economy
it's metaphoric.
Is nightmarish, but the government's doing great. They're breaking in. What'd you say, Ryan? $1 billion a day or something?
They were at one point. I don't know if it's still, but it was crazy. $1 billion a day is how much the European Union was paying them for fossil fuels.
What is Putin? I've heard, right, that people have said he's the richest man in the world.
He probably is, but it's all hidden wealth. Yeah.
Right. So so yeah, of course, Putin will do fine if he doesn't get assassinated, but
that's the issue. That's the issue, whether he'll get assassinated.
All right. So, not a mad genius. Okay.
I don't think so.
I think that's the consensus.
Probably not. Be kind of cool if he was.
All right. Last question. You guys ready?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Is Seattle? So I watched So is Seattle, and I'm going to put San Francisco in there as well. Is Seattle and San Francisco dying? And I watched a video of that title, and it was basically about their homelessness problem, which they attribute to pretty much a drug problem. Is basically like that's 100% drug driven. And then they were showing a number of stats on crime in those cities, and like how they've just astronomically been escalating, and due to like a kind of like a soft police force, right?
Defund the police.
You defund the police in the name of compassion, right? And from a compassion census, and basically they're getting like people that are fed up or moving out, and they're making a case for it. And they showed some stats. They showed the crime going up, and they did show some things of people leaving, that there is some migration, but it wasn't huge. So I don't know. I wanted to get your take. Like, are these cities in trouble? Are they going the wrong way, or is it just
couple months ago, California ran out of U-Hauls. Everybody was leaving. Nobody's coming.
I did see the article on that. Yeah.
Yeah, of course that's problematic. You have, like we talked about earlier, you have a bunch of CVSs and Targets and stuff that are just shutting down all of their branches in these cities because the cities are turning into hellholes. I mean, you can't sugarcoat it. even 2 years ago, I had dinner with a detective from San Francisco. And I was asking him if it was as bad as the news was reporting. And this was 2 years ago. It's way worse now. And he said, yeah, you can't walk down the street without stepping in human crap. Okay. When that's the case, who's going to want to live there? These are some of the most iconic historic cities in America. And because of the way they're being run, everybody's leaving. And you can argue that it's not the Democrats' fault, but sorry, I want to hear Ryan's rebuttal to deflect that accusation. No, it's not our fault. It's complicated. No, it's the Democrats. Their policies are ruining these cities, and that's what Democrats do. We talked about this in the gun episode. 19 of the 20 cities in America where we have all the gun deaths, like where 90 some odd % of all the gun violence happens, Democrats. They don't know how to run cities. They're trying to advocate for the poor, which is the proper place of the left. They just don't know how to do it. Not anymore, at least. And then you have like the unintended consequences, like we were talking about earlier, when you're pushing for green energy and stuff like that. Great, your heart's in the right place. But when you make gas and other forms of energy more expensive, who does that hurt? Poor people. So yeah, these cities are falling apart. People are moving out, moving to other places, and they'll have to have like a regentrification or something when Republicans take over.
Ryan, what do you think?
Damn elitists, right? It's just the elitists.
You look like you were looking some stuff up.
I was. The mayor of Salt Lake City is a Democrat.
Yeah, Salt Lake City sucks.
Oh yeah, Salt Lake City's crime rate's crazy. Can't walk through the street without poop everywhere. Like, come on, Josh.
Did I say that?
You said that it's Democrats don't know how to run cities. Is Salt Lake City a disaster? I don't think so.
See how you evaded it?
No,
I wanted to know how you were going to evade it. The worst cities are run by Democrats. That's what I said.
Yeah, that's always going to be true. That's just the statement of truth. Let's just pause for a second, right? San Francisco and Seattle have some of the most expensive housing of any city in the country. In fact, in the world, it's incredibly expensive. So what is really driving the homelessness problem? Is it they're all drug addicts, or is it that people can't find a place to live? So I think we have to complicate that a little bit, that it's really, really expensive to live in these cities. Then if you look in San Francisco, I don't know if it was last year or this year, they just elected a new mayor who is going to be tough on crime. And I think that mayor's a Democrat. So the platform was, we need to crack down on crime. There's clearly an issue here. We've had this discussion before, and I think it's fair. And I think it's one of the things that I've learned from this podcast that I think is a good thing. Josh argues that we need both conservatives and we need progressives. Progressive pushes forward, right? They're all about like equality, human rights, and taking care of the poor. And conservatives are like, slow down. Let's just, think about this carefully. I think every city is going to swing back and forth on that pendulum all the time. So you go a little soft, and then you go a little hard, and then
to a degree, like in Utah, we're going to be swinging on the right side of the pendulum. In California, you're going to be swinging on the left side. But I agree.
It's going to go back and forth, yes, right? And so what I think we're seeing right now in San Francisco is a number of factors combined to increase the homelessness and the crime rate. I don't think they defunded the police, right? That's a fun talking point. Sure, there was this whole movement, but it was never to actually, with one exception, to get rid of the police force entirely. It was to take some of the funding away and to turn that into, instead of sending the police when there's certain calls, we send social workers. Because we don't need the police to do everything. They're not trained social workers. So that's a canard is what it is, right? I hate that. I think in San Francisco, they recognize there are problems, and they're now trying to fix the problems, including getting harder on crime, right? Let's crack down on the crime rate and see if we can address some of these issues. Is it going to solve it tomorrow? No. Is everybody going to leave San Francisco? No. Have people left? Yeah, sure. People have left, and that they're speaking with their actions that they're dissatisfied with what's going on, and that's going to lead to change.
Do you think so? That was what you said was interesting, because the video I watched brought the same thing up about whether it's a housing issue or whether it's a drug issue, and they said that it's often framed as a housing issue, but homelessness is really a drug issue, and so yeah, you don't agree from your.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say it's one or the other. I would say it's probably both, right? That there are a lot of homeless people.
Right. I mean, I'm sure it's issues. A contribution of both, but like, yes. Do you think it's which one?
Primarily, it's a mental health issue.
Well, I think mental health is a big problem too, but I think
that's the main reason. Because
you think most that's the primary?
Absolutely.
Mental health.
Yeah. Who wants to live on the street? Nobody wants to. Yeah, I mean, normal people don't want to live on the street.
But when you don't have a choice, Josh, because you just can't afford housing.
No, that's not true, because there's so many cities. Salt Lake has a great program where if you don't have a house, you can come here and they'll find some place for you to stay. Most cities have something like that.
No, not most cities. A handful.
Most large cities have places.
My city doesn't have that. New York City doesn't have that. LA doesn't have that. Most major cities do not have that, Josh.
I actually think you have to be on drugs to be on the street, because it's so intolerable to sleep in the cold or the heat on the ground in cardboard in urine, right? Like, this is you actually have to be on drugs in order to tolerate it. Now, which is the chicken or the egg, right? Like,
well, some people get on drugs and then they lose their job, but I don't know that everybody
that's what I'm
on
saying.
The street is on drugs, because drugs still cost money. Right? I mean, how are you going to get the drugs? So I don't think everybody's on drugs.
Well, crime, right? That's why you have crime. But
yeah,
I think if you're homeless, you are either on drugs or you're mentally ill, right? And you have to be one of those two, because if you don't want to be homeless, I agree with Josh, you will not be homeless. Like, if you really don't want to be homeless, like if you actually don't want to be homeless, you will not be homeless. And you see that with immigrants all the time, right? Incredibly poor, but they will sell freaking flowers or whatever on the intersection they'll go to the Home Depot and work, right? They'll get hired at the Home Depot and earn money. They will not be, if you don't want to, you will not be.
We have a safety net. And we have it for a reason.
Now, what I don't know is that I don't think there's a safety net. I just think you cannot tolerate it, and you literally have to be on drugs in order to tolerate how horrible it is to live on the street. And so I agree with you. I don't know what it's the chicken or the egg, right? Do you become homeless and then you turn to drugs?
I don't think it's
drugs what ends up getting you?
I think it's mental health.
There are some people who choose homelessness. They reject basically what is normative, right? So in the US, and basically around the world, but in the US particularly, there's just this assumption that if you want to have X, Y, and Z, a place to live, food to eat, right? Basic like utilities, you will work. And there are people, and I don't know how many, I don't know the numbers, right? I'm not an expert on homelessness. I don't know how many, but there are people who just reject that. They reject the premise and say, I don't want to work. And if that means I have to be homeless, okay, I'll be homeless. And some of them will take temporary jobs, right? So they'll take a temporary job and they'll get some stuff or whatever, but they will intentionally be homeless, because then the expectations, right? Like what they have to do in order to meet their basic necessities is much lower. Right. I mean, like, both of you are homeowners.
Nomadic lifestyle.
Yeah, exactly. They're basically
so that they don't have to. I don't have to get a job. I don't have to do this because I don't.
Or if I get a job, it's for 2 weeks, right, or 3 weeks. Right, it's a temporary job, enough to save up to travel to the next city and eat. But I sleep on the street, or I have a tent, or I do it. And I was in Portland a year ago, right? There are a number of people in Portland who have just opted for that. They're just like, yeah, I'll live in a tent.
But again, at what point does that stray into mental illness? Because a lot of these people are mentally ill.
But that doesn't mean you're mentally ill if you reject the system.
Ryan, what I think you're describing is like
usually
is really a subgroup within home. We just say homelessness is the word we use, and yes, they are people without homes. But it's when I say homelessness, I'm talking about a certain type of person, right? That's like on the street, cardboard, pushing a shopping cart around, kind of a thing. and causing a lot of damage. But yeah, I agree. There's certainly this group that's just like nomadic group, but that's not the typical homeless person I encounter, right? So that's interesting.
Well, I mean, the homeless population
that certainly doesn't describe the average homeless person, right?
Right. But I think we need to recognize that the homeless population is complicated. It's not just drug abusers. It's not just mental health people. Some of them are veterans, right? Some of them have PTSD, which is a mental health issue. Some of them opt for this. Some of them are just poor, right? Yeah. Some have literally just been evicted from their home because they're not making enough money. And, I think, Tom, you actually said this, right? Yeah, thanks, Biden.
What?
You just made this point about immigrants, right? The house literally right across the street. I don't know if they're immigrants, but I guarantee, I mean, that house is no bigger than mine. My house is a 3-2.
There's like 30 people in there.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. Right. There are, and on any given night, at least 8 cars in that driveway. And there have to be like 15 people living in that house. Right. And then the house next to mine, right? A rental unit. That one's not a rental, the one across the street. And they're actually really nice, right? Like they're keeping it up. They're doing a really good job. I don't know how many people live there. I see people that are new all the time. The one right next to me is a rental. I don't think on any given night it's more than like 4 or 5, but it's constantly different people churning through. And, it's basically people who don't have regular jobs. And he just takes care of them, right? He's like, oh, come work with me. I'll give you a job for, however long you need. And they kind of find a place to live. So there's a lot of people who are not technically homeless, but they're moving place to place to place because they can't get, a full-time job. A lot of people work part-time jobs. They work temporary jobs. So we cover up a lot of the people who really are, what's the term for it? There's a term for it, but I'm forgetting. It's like just housing insecure. Yeah, they're on the fringe. They're housing insecure. They don't have a house all the time. They don't have a guaranteed house. They move. Sometimes they're in a hotel, right? Like it's messy. It's complicated.
I guess that's what I describe as that is like, what do I call it? How you differentiate homeless, right? Is like, you can be house insecure and people will take you up, or you can sleep places because you are tolerable. But like, as soon as drugs make you intolerable, right? That's why people's lives fall apart when they when I say, when you become a drug addict, that's sort of the conclusion I came to. It's like, because all of a sudden it's like, oh, Jimmy's not staying here. Last time he stole this and that, and he did this, and he left a needle on my, in my sink. Like,
there is a reason that they're illegal. They don't make you pleasant. Oh, he's on heroin and he sings so nice. Better.
He always does the dishes afterward.
But do keep in mind, there are more people who are drug addicts who are not homeless than are homeless.
No, and
there are lots of cocaine addicts who are our elitist politicians.
Yeah, no, I was about to make that distinction. What I guess I'd say is like kind of that spiraling out of control drug behavior, because yes, there are lots that can manage a life for a considerable amount of time. Yeah. And I'm actually impressed with that, with how many people can do, because yes, I do know some, and yeah, that's pretty amazing. So, but I think it's always, I think it's the primary factor for homelessness is drugs, in my opinion. But I just wanted to get your guys' take. So that's interesting. So you disagree? Well, what do you think, Ryan? Josh was all in. He's like, yes, Seattle, San Francisco, they're dying.
Well, you're asking multiple questions.
You're just saying, Ryan, that the pendulum's swinging, and that it's just sort of, and now it's going to swing back a little bit. We're getting harder on crime, and it's going to clean up the city.
And they're already doing it in San Francisco. Like, if you look, I heard a podcast on this. I don't remember if it was like the Daily or the Wall Street Journal, but they were talking about like, what does this latest election in San Francisco for the mayor really mean about what's going on in San Francisco? And it was the mayor who was elected was saying, we need to crack down on the crime problem. So they've already started swinging the other way, saying we got an issue, right? There's clearly a problem here. We have to be a little harder on this. How hard they're going to go, I don't know. We'll see.
In Seattle, didn't the police chief just quit or something? She was like, the mayor's like telling me I can't do anything on crime, so I'm done. And you got police just leaving. So maybe San Francisco will turn it around a little bit if it's not too far gone, but doesn't look like Seattle's there yet.
Do you really think that it's just going to be like the city is going to implode and become Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome.
Look at Chicago.
It's just derelict and dead.
Just leave it. It's just gone.
If it does, I am moving there tomorrow. That sounds awesome.
What is that?
It's not gonna
Escape from New York.
Exactly.
Escape from LA.
Getting there.
Look at Chicago. Okay, Chicago was one of the industrial centers of the world not that long ago, with all the iron and manufacturing, and then it turned to absolute crap, and everybody left.
Detroit.
Or sorry.
Okay, I was like, I'm sorry. Lots of people really like Chicago.
Sorry. Thank you, Detroit.
Yeah. Well, that's true, right? It did kind of implode, I agree with Ryan.
Pretty complicated, right? Because a lot of the manufacturing went overseas, and but that was really
that's not the only reason. There are lots of crime. I mean, insane amount of crime.
But which came first, right? I think that's an interesting question.
Who was running the city?
Democratic elitists, because Republican politicians can't be elitists. They don't want to control your life. They
can.
Right, Josh, I agree with you. And so I've seen a couple, because this is a big talking point of the right, is that these big crime cities and are run, and they're perpetually run by Democrats, right? They never get a Republican back in. But I guess the counter argument to that would be big cities almost always do that, and that's why Salt Lake City has a Democratic mayor, and so it's like, I don't know why that is, right? And I don't know why they perpetually do that, but that just seems to be the way we do it. Is the bigger the urban center, the more Democratic we become, and that's like the richer. Like there's articles about Utah becoming more. We're going more and more to the left as we become more affluent and become bigger and larger, and that's just sort of the reality of things. So it's weird that we do that, because
it's more metropolitan. When you interact with people that's more diverse, it leads to people moving to the left.
Well, and I'm just saying,
and then they destroy the city, and then they all leave and go to the country.
Escape from New York. San Francisco is going to become the Thunderdome.
And
I'm moving there too. Josh,
I agree, Josh, that I don't think
down.
It's the.
Let's do it.
This is the weird thing, right? And this is where I talk about what I've talked about with Trump. It's Trump's fault. It's who elected Trump, and if Trump died mid-office, we would find it. People will. If we hadn't scratched that itch, we would find another Trump. And
Trump was not the cause; he was the symptom.
Yes,
right? He was a symptom.
Exactly, and that's what I think about Democrat leaders in the big. That's what the point I'm trying to make is. It's the people become more democratic, and then they elect more democratic leaders, which pass more democratic laws. And are they wrong? Right? It's just, it's different. And some people could say, it's a problem. It's and I think both Ryan and I are agreeing with you that they've swung too far in these cities, right? And they're going to swing back. But they're not going to all of a sudden elect a Republican. That's the interesting thing, right? They'll just get a more conservative Democrat. That's weird to me. That you would be like, well, don't you want to try this other flavor? No, we don't.
They never do. And that's both parties are guilty of that. Both constituents are guilty of that. It's weird. The guy I elected sucked, but I'm not going to switch to the other side. We're just going to double down.
Yeah. And people will do that all the time, right? I would never voted for a Democrat in the last election, but I was not going to vote for Trump, right? I basically threw my vote away, but I would not have voted for a Democrat. No way. Because I agree with the platform of
then you have to defend your vote. That's the funny part. I was able to criticize Trump his first term because I didn't vote for him. So I was able to criticize him. I don't have to defend that. I don't have to defend myself to other people. People take it very personally. The guy that I voted for is sucking, so I've got to overlook his flaws, and I'm going to defend him to the death.
No, what's funny is we're at this playing games with my family, and we were a week or two ago, and we have a very liberal nephew, and he comes and he's like. And it was really funny that we were talking. He started getting into politics. He started throwing stuff out there. He's very antagonistic. And he's like, "Oh, and Biden sucks. I hate that guy." And he just threw it out, and we weren't even talking about Biden.
Wow.
And I was like, "Why would he say that?" And I realized he's saying it so that we can't attack him, so that he doesn't have to defend him, right?
Wow,
because
smart.
Because it'd be like if we came into these conversations, Ryan's often, skewering Trump, but you can be like, well, I didn't vote for him. So, or I hate him, right? I hate that guy. And I could say I didn't vote for him, but I knew my nephew had voted for Biden. But now he can say, I hate him. Therefore you can't attack him. Right. He's like, basically like, it's kind of like I'm just going to upfront just say you win so that I don't have to get in an argument, a losing argument.
He had you off at the pass there. Brilliant. Yeah. Ryan should try that because he still defended Biden.
No, but it was interesting that he did that. He just like preemptively was like, I hate that guy. Let's, don't don't attack Biden.
Don't attack me.
I'm not going to try to.
I don't support him.
Right. Exactly.
That is interesting.
I thought it was funny. So anyway, but yeah, okay. That was good. I thought those were all. Any last comments, anything that you guys want to throw out with any of these questions?
I think our next topic next time has to be the definition of elitist.
What is
I already gave it to you. Here, let me clarify my thoughts, because maybe I wasn't super clear there. Okay, when you have like socialism, okay, when you have these people that take over and say, oh, this is interesting. This is a Jordan Petersonism. Ryan will love it.
Oh boy.
So you have people defending democratic socialism, saying it's not socialism. It's different. We'll do it right this time. And he says he has this quote saying that's the most arrogant thing that you can possibly say, because you look at the history of socialism where you have millions of dead bodies, hundreds of millions of dead bodies left in the wake of socialism and communism. It doesn't work. And what you're saying is, well, I know how to make it work. Put me in charge and I'll do it correctly this time. I know what to do to make it work for everybody, and I know how to tell you all to live your lives. Okay, that's elitism, because it's absurd to think that this system that's been tried over and over again and just kills people left and right. It's absurd to think that you can make it work, but so many people say exactly that. Well, okay, I know how to make it work.
But Josh,
that's elitism. That's insanity.
Can't we say the exact same thing about capitalism? Aren't there thousands, millions of people?
How many hundreds of millions?
Blanket absurdist statement that makes no sense. You've agreed in the past that capitalism is the best of the worst systems, right?
Sure.
It's not a great system, and people die from capitalism all the time. Because it's an exploitative system that takes advantage of the poor and gives to the rich.
Let's compare it head to head.
And millions of people die as a result.
How many people have been killed by their own government in the name of capitalism?
Okay, you're skirting the issue.
I'm not.
You're totally
That's exactly
skirting the issue. Because you're saying there's no way that socialism can ever work. It's a broken system. And I'm saying, actually, in the US, we have socialistic enterprises.
Not socialism.
Do we want a capitalist police system? Do we want a capitalist police system?
We already talked about this.
I know we did.
We have social elements in the capitalist society.
Exactly.
It's not socialism.
So all we're doing
is not socialism.
We're becoming more and more socialist.
We're moving along a continuum. That's all it is. It's a continuum from socialism to capitalism.
It's a different mindset.
You already conceded this in the previous podcast.
Well, I wonder if we can do another related topic.
Okay, but I was trying to talk about elitism. Did you get my interpretation there?
So
that's elitism, to say I know what's best for everybody else, and I'm going to make them follow my laws and my rules, and that's going to be what's best for them.
Okay, so Ron DeSantis would be an elitist.
In some ways.
In some ways, yeah, he falls under that rubric. Yeah,
because he's certainly trying to tell me what I have to do. He said he thinks he knows what's best for me.
No, because the
what do you mean no?
I mean, in some ways, okay, but for the most part,
you took away my ability to not.
Let me finish the thought.
Sure, go ahead.
The libertarian mindset is everybody should be able to decide for themselves. Okay, and that kind of goes hand in hand with conservatism. That's why I'm not a full-blown Republican, right? Because it's there's still an element of elitism there. I'll give you an example of Republicans doing this here in Utah when they tried to crack down on alcohol laws, right? Because of the church or whatever. No drinking here in Utah. That's a form of elitism. You're telling other people what to do with their lives. I don't like that. But the Democrats are just way worse about it, especially when you're leaning towards socialism. Does that definition work, or are you going to just keep skirting it.
No. So as long as you apply it both ways.
Yeah,
if you apply it both ways, because
I never did not.
Democrats and socialists, they're the elitists, and I'm like, everything that you're describing is basically politicians who say, I think I know what's best for you and I'm going to force you to do it. But that is absolutely
who
Ron
does
DeSantis.
That more? Who does that? No, it's not. Because he still
absolutely
has
it's Ron DeSantis.
Libertarian leanings. Most conservatives do, where we're trying to let people decide for themselves. The whole Roe v. Wade thing, Democrats said, we know what's best. We're going to say.
And now Democrats are doing the exact opposite. Republicans are doing the exact opposite.
No,
we know what's best. You guys can't get abortions.
Republicans threw it back to the states.
Yeah, and what did Kansas just do?
Decide for yourself. Decide for yourself. Okay, Kansas can decide for itself.
That would be great if they let all of us do it, because they're not letting us do it. They're not letting the people in the states decide. The politicians in the states are deciding.
Agreed, and that makes the canvas legislators elitist, right?
Bingo.
Yes,
and that would be
I totally agree.
And Democrats.
I totally agree. Totally agree. And what I guess what I would say is
no difference.
There is actually, because you're doing what your constituents voted you in to do.
Josh, this is what I think is what you're seeing. Is that we're actually, we have a liberal administration, federal administration, right? And our basically our country is actually quite liberal right now. I think we're seeing more episodes of this when 80s, 90s, when we were more conservative, and that was the big arguments against a liberalism or elitism against conservatives of like, don't tell me what to do in the bedroom, right? Of like, don't tell me when I can get an abortion. Don't tell me who I can and can't marry.
That
right?
comparison I'll agree with. Yes.
And I just think we're now more liberal. So I think the argument's now coming up with more, because right now Iran.
What?
I didn't say anything.
All you're saying is we should all be libertarian. Yes, I agree.
No, I think there is a lot to say about that. Yeah. So I think I don't think it's always liberals. I just think we're seeing a lot of it with liberals right now because they're the main group in power. And,
that's fair.
And then, so we're seeing more examples of
that. Good take, Tom. Good take. Maybe we need to do an episode on libertarianism.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
Ryan's head will literally explode.
Whatever, Josh. I'm actually very libertarian on a lot of issues, and we agree on a lot.
You just hate to admit it because you lose cachet with all of your woke friends.
What is the thing you say, Josh? Personal power. What is it? It's something about the core of the country is personal power. I don't know. I really liked it. But anyway,
no idea
what you're saying.
All right. Okay.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
The primacy of the individual is more important.
Yeah, the power. Individual. Yes, the primacy of the individual, and
that's what the West is founded upon. Anybody that tries to take it away, you're an elitist.
Stop using elitist.
All right.
Stop
I will not. I will not, just because it strikes too close to home for you. No,
it doesn't strike close at home at all. That's why it doesn't make any sense. You keep calling me something that I'm not. That's like me calling you a Jehovah's Witness.
Josh,
I insist that you're a Jehovah's Witness.
You called yourself.
You said that because you're a Jehovah's. That was what a Jehovah's Witness would say. Okay. All right. This is getting out of control. We're gonna end this, guys. Thank you. I thought that was great discussions, and there was a lot of interesting subjects that we talked about. So, and there were some that was good. There was some of these was totally on the fence on, so it was fun to hear you guys' perspectives. But we'll come back next week. What I was trying to say was maybe that should be the thing we talk about next week, but we'll come up with something really good next week and hammer it. But all right, we'll talk to you next time.
Josh, we may not always agree when it comes to politics, even though we're trying, but there is one thing we agree on. There is only one way to clean up after going to the bathroom, and that's with a Lux bidet.
I've been a proud owner of a Lux bidet for years. I have literally owned a Lux Neo 320 since 2013. That's the warm water model. Talk about happy, fun, poopy time. When I leave the bathroom, I know I'm clean and ready to talk politics in a civilized manner.
Exactly. Using a toilet without a bidet is about as uncivilized as it gets. Civil conversations demand civil hygiene practices.
And that is why our listeners should get themselves a Lux bidet.
And just to be clear, Lux is not supporting one side or the other in this podcast. They support civil conversations and clean butts.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Finding Common Battlegrounds. The music is by Ben Sound. The views expressed in this podcast are those of the participants and not those of their employers. For more information or more episodes, you can find us at findingcommonbattlegrounds.com.
Cool. Yeah, I don't know what this DeSantis suspending duly elected state. You're always throwing in your local politics into these things, and I'm always like, we don't all live in Florida, Ryan.
Because any shot he can take at Trump or DeSantis, he's got to take it.
For the most part, I think Ryan's been. I haven't heard. You haven't taken that many shots at DeSantis for how Trumpish he is. I almost expected you to complain about him more.
Well, he has Trumpist policies, but he doesn't do all the blatantly idiotic stuff that Trump did, right? There's not as much cannon fodder to play with.
He's not so crazy.
No, but a couple of his
but some of his stuff has been pretty, I would say, outrageous.
What he just did was horrific. Yeah.
Like the Disney, the don't say gay bills, right? And like punishing Disney for their by taking away some of their land thing. I thought that's pretty interesting stuff. I was like, that's pretty a little extreme, but anyway.
Well, I think it's symptomatic of, if he is elected as president of the US, he is going to play at some level the same kind of petty politics that Trump did, right? So you guys didn't vote for me? Screw you. I'm going to come after you, and I'm going to try and hurt you in any way I can.
Is that what you've seen?
Yeah. So Andrew Warren, he was elected by the citizens in my county, Hillsborough County, to be our state attorney, right? So he basically prosecutes all of the, decides which cases at that level are going to be prosecuted. That's his job. We elected him in Hillsborough County. Yeah. Ron DeSantis just said, nope, I'm kicking you out.
Because he was picking and choosing what laws to
Which laws, Josh? Which laws?
I didn't even look into it.
Laws, right? He said, I am not going to prosecute women who make their own medical decisions. And then the other one that he said,
if the law in Florida says that is the law, he should prosecute it.
But he gets to choose which cases he spends his limited budget on, and that's literally his job. He has to choose which cases they spend their money on.
I'd have to look into the actual job ramifications there. I don't know enough about it, but if he's using his politics to choose which cases he's going to prosecute,
every state attorney does it.
Yeah, I agree.
Every state attorney does it.
That's the thing. I mean, and Josh, that's kind of what you're saying, right? It's in primacy of the individual is what makes this country great. I really agree with that, and I really like that. And that's right. Anyone who shows that's sort of what he did is like that's tyrannical, right? I don't trust you. I'm gonna punish you for not doing that.
Well, and he's punishing me because I voted for Andrew Warren, right? He just took somebody I voted out of office.
Is that the guy? Andrew Warren?
And okay. Ron DeSantis just said, all you Hillsborough County voters, right, which is hundreds of thousands, there's probably millions of us. He said, your votes don't matter.
So I know that
I agree with my politics.
I know that some governors can veto an appointment, right, or things like that. So I don't. Is this a legal thing? And
so it is legal what he can do.
Legal, but it just looks bad.
Oh, looks awful, and it's not final. So if Warren, the state attorney, if he tries to defend himself, then it goes to the state Senate, and they get to make the ultimate decision, right? Okay. But there are like three grounds on three bases for which you can remove somebody from office. And he has the power to do that, but he has to have a basis for doing it. And that the grounds are like, they're drunk on their job, right? They're not doing their job. They're not showing up to their job, right? So they're like all these specific things. Yeah. And he's saying, he's not enforcing the laws.
Right.
He has said, Andrew Warren has said he's not going to enforce those laws, but there's no evidence that he's actually done.
Right. Well, I don't feel as bad about this then, because then the Senate gets to decide, and if they decide it, then.
And you're just seeing it from your liberal viewpoint. I imagine there's about half the people in your city that would want him removed, right?
Not in my city. In my city, it would be maybe 30%. My city is probably like 70-30. Because the big cities are like that. So.
I just watched this article on the king of Saudi Arabia, the crown prince, I guess, MBS Mohammed bin Solomon. Yeah. And he is very interesting. It was a frontline report that they did on basically like he's come into power and just totally gone tyrannical. And like the assassination of that guy,
Jamal Khashoggi.
Yeah, Khashoggi. And like just stuff like that. Anyone who was speaking against him, he's been punishing. And it's just like, it's just like this, always the same pattern, right? Of like, they can't trust other people to make decisions. They can't, or even to criticize them. They become almost
unaccepted.
Yeah. It's fairly interesting. And it was funny because they made one comment that was I thought so thought provoking, is that the guy comes to power, he becomes the crown prince and then goes tyrannical. And you're like, you just got all the power. You should now relax, right? And that's
never what happens.
Right.
It's got to consolidate the power.
It is. I mean, I wouldn't say it's never what happens. I think it's more, it's what happens when you get a tyrant. It's always what happens when they become tyrannical. When they're not tyrannical, then they trust the people. And
that power begins to corrupt. That's why Calvin Coolidge, he was super popular 100 years ago. And after his first term, he would have easily won a second. He said, no, this is starting to go to my head. I'm starting to believe what people are saying about me. Really? So he didn't run for the second term, because most people that have that kind of power, I mean, that saying's cliche.
Power corrupts. Power corrupts, absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's true. When you have that kind of power, it's so hard not to abuse it. So hard not to let it go to your head.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. It makes me want to be in power just to test it out.
Absolutely. I'll take the test. Did you see that weird thing that Biden did with that Saudi guy where
he fist bumped at him?
Yeah, everybody's like, he can't shake his hand. He's horrible.
Well, he said
like, I won't shake his hand. And so he gives him a fist bump instead. Like, oh my gosh, this is so pedantic.
It is. No, I totally will concede that. Right?
That
like he made a statement. He never should have said, "I'm never going to have relations with Mohammed bin Salman," because we trade with Saudi Arabia, right? Like they buy all of our military equipment. We buy their oil. Like, to make those kinds of statements is basically just painting yourself into a corner that you're eventually going to have to step on the fucking paint, right? Like you're just going to have to. And he did, but he's like, nope, fist bump. Right?
I didn't shake his hand.
I didn't shake his hand.
It was stupid. It was stupid. I saw
made out with him when we went around the corner.
Just that kind of weird pedantic politicking. It's so silly.
Yeah. Well, agreed.
And everybody does it. I'm not picking on Biden.
Do you notice that I didn't defend him on this, Josh?
Good work. I'm proud of you.
Yeah, I hate that guy. Don't bring it.
I hate that guy. Done. Yeah. Preemptively.
I wouldn't be able to take most of the shots they take at you if you would just say, I hate Biden. I'm not defending him anymore. I wouldn't have anything. You would depower me.
No more Hunter Biden jokes. Because I hate him.
I hate Hunter Biden. There. Done.
Totally.
Oh, that's funny.
All right. Good stuff.
Yep. All right. I will try and get this up tomorrow.
All right. Awesome. Take care, folks.
All right. See ya. Bye-bye.